Hello, hello! I'm back with my round cheek brushes. I'm going to start with the squirrel one, and then I'm going to talk about the goat one. So squirrel first and then goat. So hopefully the camera behaves this time. So I've kind of arranged them in order of kind of approximately size and shape. So we're going to start over here with the domed one. So this is the Stalazzi Finishing Bookie. This doesn't have an L numbered code. And this one is currently something crazy like $8.75 on Friends Beauty. So if you want a blue squirrel round brush, go get this one. This is the Finishing Bookie. It's a fairly small brush. It's supposed to be a face brush, but for me, it's solidly cheek size. I really don't have anything else to say about this one besides it's fantastic. Go get it if you can. This is the Tonsil Ss14. This is gray squirrel or ash squirrel as they call it on your website. This one's a fairly large one. This one almost borders on face brush territory for me, but not quite. This is like a very big blush brush. So I'll start with like sort of a light nudier blush color of this one because it covers so much area. And then that kind of like sculpts out my face first, and then I'll use like a smaller brush to go on top with a lighter color or beneath with a darker blush color, and that's how I sort of add dimension to my face with blush. So this one is probably great for those with a lot of surface area or a lot of cheek space. Me, I have a lot of cheek space, but I like to keep it contained to a very small area to kind of add more, I guess, contours to my face. So this one has a lot of potential as a powder brush or round powder brush, but as a blush brush, you might not like it because it might be too large. Same applies with the KZ04. This one's just slightly more restrained. So the KZ04 is about the same size, and then it's very airy as well. So the Tonsil Ss14 is airy because it's loosely packed. The KZ04 is airy because the hairs actually are airy. If I squeeze at the bottom, it does feel like it's a bit more packed in. But red squirrel or cotton squirrel, which is what the Chicahodo KZ series uses, is very, very light, soft, and just look at that beautiful flex. It feels fantastic. A great brush to have. Next up is a small to medium round cheek brush. This is the Chicahodo RCC2. RCC2 is the red handle, and it has this like nice metallic red gleam. The RC2 is the black handle, and I do like this one a lot. It's on the small to medium size, and this one's a bit more firm, being made of gray squirrel, than the cotton squirrel is. Like this one's like super airy. Not super airy, but I would describe it as airy. This one is actually relatively firm for a gray squirrel brush, and it's really good at application and blending. Great one to have. This is the Shakuda. This is the Soothing Face Brush 804. Walnut handle, gray squirrel hair. This one has a bit more of a taper to it, but all intents and purposes, it's a blush brush, not really a highlight brush, because it still does cover quite a decent amount of area. Flex-wise, it's a little bit more directional than the RCC2, but the directionality comes from the taper at the tip. When it comes to firmness, if you like a really more plushy, puff-like gray squirrel brush, you'll want the RC2. Like I said, this is quite resilient and firm for a gray squirrel brush, but not firm to the point of like a puff, like an actual sponge puff. This one's a bit more flexible, but the tip does have bounce to it because all these long hairs are buffered by these side hairs here. This one is a highlight or a blush brush. I use this as a blush brush because sometimes I do like smaller blush brushes. This is made of Kazan Squirrel, and it's fantastic. If you've seen my Hakuhodo top 10 videos, this one is in there, and it's just great. Up until the KZ series here were released, Hakuhodo offered the only Kazan Squirrel brushes that I know of. So this one's an old favorite. It's really, really sort of bouncy and very smooth, just like with the Kazan Squirrel in the KZ series. There's a little bit of a color difference, but to me, it hasn't really impacted the quality of how the hair feels on my face. Sorry, this is the 5518. So this brush is a great one if you have smaller cheeks and you really like concentrating color and blending it out. It's really fantastic. To me, the Hakuhodo 210, which is made of goat, is too dense and too strong. This one, I probably wouldn't use it if something like Nars Exhibit A, but for almost any other blush, this is a great brush to pair with it. This is the Chicahodo Z3. It's called the Cheek/Highlight. This is a rather large brush for me, so I don't use this for highlight. I use this for blush. And it's quite flexible at the tip, but all these longer hairs, all these shoulders here buffer the longer hairs here. So this one is very flexible at the tip. So if you really like dusting your blush on, this is a great one to have. Also, if you like to powder underneath your eyes to set your concealer, this is a nice one. It's very, very soft. And then unless you like really swirl it in there, you can't, okay, I can't say you can't possibly, you likely won't have a cakey under eye if you apply powder with this one. Let's contrast it to the Z2, the highlight brush from Chicahodo. This one's more firmly packed in, so if you try to powder under your eye with this one, you might end up with too much powder versus this one. Part of it is also the size difference because this one has so much longer hairs. It feels airier and thus distributes powder and other products in a more layerable fashion. The Z2 is kind of a brush where you put color down and then you go and blend it out. So it's good if you have a small face because you could get away with applying blush with this, but mostly this is a highlight as well as a contour blush. And speaking of contour brushes, I'll get to that one later. This one's a flat top brush. It's a quite small blush brush by Hakuhodo. This is the discontinued BP022. I'm comparing it to the RC2 for size. The BP022 is fairly unique in that it's a rather packed gray squirrel flat top brush. It feels really, really nice, and I highly recommend getting it. It's a bit pricier, but if you can find it secondhand, like this is a fantastic blush brush to have. At first, when I didn't get it, I was skeptical, but it just applies blush so well. You swirl it in the pan and you apply it to your face in like outward spirals, and it just blends in seamlessly. My initial fear was like because of the flat top and the edge, I'd have to blend more, but it just pretty much blends in blush by itself, kind of like this one. Like with these two, the initial fear were that the blush would apply too heavily, but as you're applying it and swirling it on, it just blends into your skin by itself. This is a Chicahodo Z3, so it's a contour brush, but I've seen some eye brushes bigger than this before. So this is good for getting down the nose into the hollows of your cheeks, and if you like to contour your orbital socket, this is good for that. I am destashing this one because I have other brushes that I prefer for it. I like using paddle brushes such as the Hakuhodo GS1 to contour my eyelid socket, and this one just doesn't really get used for contour or for eye sculpting, so this one's going to be destashed. And then we have this Tonsil Ss14. This is made of gray swirl, and it's a great under eye dusting brush or a area of effect highlighter. So remember earlier how I said I would go with more nudie color blush to like kind of add some dimension. So that'd be the big area of color, and then a smaller area of color with this brush. So like either a darker one sort of underneath the hollow of the cheekbone, or a lighter one on top of the cheekbone. This one's a great highlighter brush, but it is a bit loose and fluffy and airy. I don't know if many people like it for that reason. Another option, well, the only other option that I have is the Shakuda Bright Up Blush. This is the 820. This is technically an eye brush, but it's clearly a very large eye brush. This is much firmer. As you can see, that spring back is pretty fast. As opposed to this one, it takes its kind of sweet time, especially at the long end, coming back into shape. So this makes a great contour brush, better than the T3. The only thing is, if you like using your contour in like little circular motions like this one isn't really as conducive to that, because as you can see, those bristles move around a lot more. This is better for like the sort of like swiping on of contour and then a little bit of up and down motion. So this one takes a little bit more attention to how you use it. This one is brainless, but for some reason I just prefer this one more. So these are all my round, and I'm basing that on the ferrule, all my round squirrel brushes. Give me a minute and I'm going to pull my round goat brushes out. Okay. Okay. Let's just get this one out of the way because it's the only Kalinski one I have. This is a Kalinski face brush. I use it as a cheek brush because, as you can see, it's cheek brush sized. So this is called a face brush, but it gets lumped in with the cheek brushes. It's fantastic. I've already talked about this enough in other videos and whatnot. So great brush, not getting rid of it for sure. This is the Stalazzi Finishing Bookie. So if you remember, I talked about the Finishing Bookie here earlier. So there's two Finishing Bookies. This is the one that's being discontinued. The gray squirrel one is being discontinued and is currently available for like $8.75 or something on the Friends website. This Finishing Bookie L310 is the one that's going to be replacing the Finishing Bookie here. As you can see, quite different in size. Fairly larger size. It's small for a face brush, but it's a decent size, well, decently big for a cheek brush. So as far as finishing goes, it's really good at wiping away powder, and even though it's dyed goat, it is quite silky and soft. Like if I poke at my face at this, I can't feel anything. I don't know if people with more sensitive skin will feel something, but considering that these brushes are fairly inexpensive, they're not fude, but they are a great value for the money. So I'm going to keep this one because it's great for using with projects or when I'm working with people and they don't really care what kind of brushes I'm using on them. Same applies for this Cheek and Chisel, again by Stalazzi. So here's the size difference. It's kind of good to have an arsenal of different round brushes. These are sort of flat-ish on the top, but otherwise they are domed enough to give you a seamless finish if you just buff them around in circles. Next up, we have these sort of three small blush brushes. So this is the Wayne Goss 13, the original, and this is the Koyudo Mizume Zakura Cherry Birch Saikoho blush brush, and this is the Sonia G Face 2. So these are all fairly the same in terms of size and feel. Saikoho, I think it's Saikoho dyed, but since all three of these are practically the same, I'm going to be destashing this one. Overall, the feel of them, relatively the same. Like this is surprisingly silky and smooth for dyed go, and it's very like non-textured. But because I am going to be keeping these two, I think I have enough of the smaller cheek brushes to keep me happy. So these are small. This is a medium. Here's the size difference for you. It doesn't look like there's that much of a difference, but because of that length as well, once you press it onto the skin, you can really see the difference in size between the small and the medium because of that spread once you apply pressure. So moving on to the medium brushes, these are, for me, in the solidly medium category. This is the Koyomo Nadeshiko, made of Ototsuo hair. This is the Koyomo Aizunuri Hana, This is made of Sokoho hair. These are both 40-year-old hair. Again, I have plenty of videos on these. Go watch them if you'd like. Now let's look at what I consider to be large brushes. So again, it doesn't look like it's that much larger, but functionally when you're applying blush to your face, it does spread out more. Like here you go, you can see like the fan shape here versus the fan shape here. Different size by about maybe like 20%. So the T4 I would consider to be a large round cheek brush. This is kind of in the same territory as the SC20 here, where I kind of lay down a bigger area of color first, and then I go on top with another blush color or a highlighter to really add dimension to my face. This one you can end up with blush in areas you don't want it in if you're not careful. So yeah, T4 is a larger Hakuhodo blush brush. Likewise with the Tonsil Ss14, this is again Hakuhodo. This one is more loosely packed in here, so if you like a really firm, resilient, puffy-like brush, this is your choice. But if you like a more like wispy brush, but you still want it to be in goat, not squirrel, and on the larger size, the Ss20 is a good option to consider. And then the Ss20 is about the same length as the Hakuhodo Z3 shift brush, but because of the way that they're constructed and the hair, you can see how different the spread is. So like this one, it kind of mounds a bit more here. This one just goes straight flat. So they're both about the same size. The difference is that the Hakuhodo has these synthetic fibers blended in there, and they add a bit more resilience than just pure Hakuhodo, and I actually have no idea what grade of goat that is in there. So, but this one's discontinued. So very nice big goat brush to have. Now we have what I call the more wispy brushes. So these are kind of the same idea as the Ss20 and the C019 in shape, but they take it much further. So they have a relatively thinner ferrule here relative to the length of the hair. So then you end up with this sort of like fluffy brush that's good for dusting. Because these are made of goat, they're relatively resilient. The WYC17 is again made of Hakuhodo and is probably the softest of the bunch, and I really do enjoy this one. The size of this one in comparison to the small ones is similar. However, because this one is more flexible, it does spread out more than the more packed in brush. So even though this has a small head, it's more equivalent to one of these medium-sized goat hair brushes when I'm applying makeup with it. Same thing applies for this one, even though it's a relatively small head. This is in comparison to the Sonia G Base 2. It applies more like a medium head. So you can see that spread. And again, you can see that spread. This one is also good for target powdering, as is this one. So say T-zone, a bit under the eyes, or if you just want to like target bronzer around the outside perimeter of your face in that classic 3 shape, these brushes are great for it. The Wayne Goss 14 is kind of in between, it's kind of in between these two because it's got the length of the Sonia G plus a little bit more, but because of that spread and that density, it's a bit more, or lack of density rather, it's a bit more like the WYC17. Like if you squeeze these brushes, it's very evident that the Wayne Goss is the least, has the least hair, and then the Tonsil WYC17 has a bit more, with the Sonia G having the most. I will be destashing the Wayne Goss because I don't need 3 separate candle brushes. And this one is from way long ago. Again, one of these not sort of candle shaped brushes, these duster shaped brushes. This one is goat. I would say if it was graded, it'd probably be Hakuhodo. This is from a brand that I got off Taobao a long time ago, and I'm just what do you call it, done with this brush. So destashing. This is the Hakuhodo Cable. So the color on this one is black to red, and it's a special color scheme because it came as part of the autumn 2017 set. In the permanent line, this would be equivalent to the J6050, and this one is a very, very loose brush. Like, look at how much spread there is. So if like dusting powder is your thing, like as sheer of a layer as possible, you'll probably like this brush. Me, I don't really have that much of a practical use for it. If I'm going to apply bronzer, which this brush can do, I pick a bigger brush. If I want to do target bronzer, I would pick this brush to do it, because I don't know, I just like this round shape better. With this one, you're really left to kind of either these linear motions in the horizontal plane or the vertical plane, not so much in the circle. It doesn't work so well. So this is a very specific brush, and I don't really use it much, so it's going. Lastly, we have these sort of candle-shaped brushes for highlight. So this is the Kanoko small with a maple handle. I honestly hadn't planned on getting this one, but the wood grain, do you see how it's like metallic on this one, was particularly pretty, so I had to pick it up. And I've really enjoyed using it for contour ever since. I don't really use it for highlight. I don't really use it for cream blush, even though it's very dense and would make a great cream blush brush. But I just mostly use this for contour and just for looking at to make me happy. But because it makes me happy, I'm going to keep it. So, sorry. This is goat and synthetic. So white synthetic is blended into the goat. And that's what kind of gives it its firmness and that quick, strong snapback. So we have the Nars Small Brightener and the Hakuhodo J5521. These are essentially interchangeable to me, and they function as very small blush brushes or highlight brushes. So they're not the most precise highlight brush ever, because that tip is a little bit more full and not, say, as pointy as this one. So you won't get like a super precise highlight, but I don't think most people like that type of look anyways. But because they're so interchangeable, I'm going to be destashing one of them. And because I've had the Hakuhodo longer, I have more loyalty to this one, so I'll be destashing the Nars. And lastly, I have this round highlight brush made of deer. This is the DC14 from Tonsil, and this works as a eye brush or as a highlight brush. Like, this one is pretty good if you're doing a big blown out smoky eye, but most of the time I use this for highlighting the cheek above the eye and then down the nose, because look how thin it is and how little surface area it covers. You really get precision with this. And because of that taper, you really get a nice diffused edge with it. Deer is not the softest hair, and that's the only reason I would recommend against this brush. I did kind of consider, do I want to destash it? Because when my skin is feeling sensitive, sometimes it can poke me. But because I don't have any other deer brushes, I am going to keep this one. So thank you for watching. That was all of my round brushes, both squirrel and goat, and one Kalinski and one deer. I'm going to answer a few questions and then hop off. I think that's all my video filming for today. Oopsies. My voice is starting to go, so I don't know if you can hear it. It's starting to sound a little bit creaky and dry. So I'll be back with my paddle cheek brushes. These were all the round ones that I have. And hopefully that video will be useful to you as well. So some of these I am destashing. I have a link to the Google Sheet with the brushes I am putting up for adoption, and you can go check that out later. I really don't know what's going on with the camera today. It's probably because of my filming setup. It's a really wonky setup. Hi guys, sorry that you missed most of the content. It will be posted up on my YouTube channel. Again, you're gonna have to give it some time to render or process whatever the thing is. Like, after I film a live, YouTube always takes a while to quote unquote process it before they put it up on my channel. So Yeah, maybe if you have the link to this video and you save it in your browser, you can watch it right away. Otherwise, wait 24 hours, it'll be back up. Okay, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.